Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. This is the Seth Joyner Show live today. Um, Changing up the format. See, I'm all about the fan interaction and how I can get you guys involved in the show. I realize that sometimes, I have my guest on and we get into the flow of the show, and the flow is really organic, and we really don't get an opportunity to engage our listeners, our fans that often. But today's show is going to be totally about you guys and the questions that you post, the questions that you ask. We're going to answer as many of those questions as we can. We're going to open up different dialogues. The other thing we're going to do is some of these best questions. My producer is prepared to get you guys information. We're going to allow you to come on the show live with us and ask your questions live. So come with your best if you want to be a part of the show today, and fire away. You know me, no holds barred. We're just gonna keep it real and keep it raw. Speaking of that, we are in our second week of training camp, and it seems like all we're talking about is COVID-19. And I realize that the first 18 to 20 days are designed basically to be an OTA style training period. But as fans, don't we want to know what's going on behind the scenes, besides the fact that, the players are being tested every day as they come in? And, you get a picture from my colleague over at NBC Sports Philadelphia, John Clark, today, that showed the social distancing going on in the meetings and things of that nature. That's all nice to see, but what I want to see is some footage. I want to see what's going on the field. I think the NFL needs to do a better job of how interactive they can be. Even during these tough times, I get it, it's difficult, but hey, the teams have the ability to do it. The teams have the ability to, pipe us in and, give us a firsthand look at what they're doing, even if it's just conditioning and very rudimentary type stuff. As fans, when you get to this time of the year, I should say, the same way that the players are itching to go, the coaching staff is itching to go, the fans are itching for some information about what's going on in camp. Zero news, it seems like to me, unless it's, someone testing positive for COVID, or whether it's a player testing positive for COVID, or a coach or a trainer. We haven't heard anything about the rookies, how they look, how they're coming along, how their training is going, injuries, how players are progressing as far as injuries and things of that nature are concerned, or, how, some of our favorite veterans are faring after 1 week in training camp, and, what they look like. So it's just a myriad of things, that we would really like to, be privy to. It just seems weird and odd at this time that, you've got so much going on, but it's so little information that's coming our way as media. I guess, this show is media driven, as media and as fans that are waiting, with bated breath to see whether or not we're actually going to have a season and how the training is actually going. All right, guys. I told you today is all about you. I see you, Mike. I see you, Michael. I see you, Billy. I see you, Mike Schuler. Everybody wants to say, hey, what's up? But I don't see any questions yet. And I need you guys to interact with me in order to, facilitate and drive this show. Right now, David Crane, thank you, David, with the first question of the day, with the story of Deuce Staley taking in person the head coaching position for Doug Peterson. Will that give him a step up on becoming a head coach in the future? You know what, David, I think everybody knows what Deuce is, what he's capable of. Will this hurt him? Absolutely not. I don't know for sure that it helps him 100%, but I don't think it hurts his situation. I think there's a lot of qualified coaches, that are out there, a lot of qualified minority coaches that are out there. A lot of times it's about opportunity. And I think that, those opportunities need to be addressed not only from the head coaching standpoint, but I would love to see more GMs and more minority GMs in positions that would facilitate, more head coaches becoming, stepping into place. And then with more head coaches stepping into place, then that opens up many more doors, for potential coaches of color to step into those positions. But Deuce knows what to do. My goodness, he's been a coach for a long time. He's been around Andy Reid. Andy Reid has an impeccable lineage or tree, if you will, of head coaches that have sprouted off from him and had success. And no doubt in my mind, in time with the right situation, Deuce Staley will be a head coach, and he'll do just fine once given that opportunity. We got Neil Tracy. Do you think realistically that they can safely play this year? Well, Neil, that's a good question. And we're going to dive into that as the show progresses. I think they can. I really do. And I'm not just saying that because, I want to see some football that, I'm jonesing for some football like everybody else is. But I think that there's a great opportunity. And let's just dive in. Since you brought it up, I can come back and get some of these other questions as we go, but let's just dive into this. You've got 45 players that have actively opted out for the season. You got 75 plus players who've been placed on the reserve COVID list. Those numbers are astronomical, to say the least. There's not a whole lot of major names that are missing from that list. But there are some top level guys that have opted not to play this season. That's concerning. You're still looking at, well over 100 players that have either opted out or, have decided not to play, been put on that list because, they've got some pre-existing conditions that would put them in danger's way. But at the end of the day, it's all about, in my opinion, players evaluating, come to an understanding of, what's best for them. I'm sure you all have seen Jack Del Rio, the defense coordinators for the Washington football team, his comment today. He said, quote, I have personal views that would probably not sit well with my professional occupation right now. He said, I'll leave it at that, end quote. Basically what he's saying is that, hey, these guys that are opting out, it's a bunch of BS. Get in here and play. He's old school. We played around the same era. I get where he's coming from. I think that, if you are a guy who has pre-existing conditions, a guy who has family members that have pre-existing conditions, then it is most certainly a major concern for you and your family. And you have to do what's best for your family. But I also think that, as football players, we want to play the game. And realizing that you've only got, so many years to play this game. This isn't baseball. This isn't tennis. This isn't golf, where you can play into your 40s, your 50s sometimes, and still be successful. At the end of the day, every year loss is potentially a year loss from you being able to do the thing that you really love. And if you can play, and if you're healthy, and if you're disciplined enough to follow the protocols, then players should play. And, that's just my opinion. If I was in this situation, you're darn right, I'd be in training camp right now and hoping and praying that, the season would be underway. But for those who make the decisions to opt out for whatever reason it is, that's on them. But that's, in my opinion, that's a major problem for the NFL moving forward. Thursday is the official opt-out day, so players have got 2 more days to basically, say whether you're in or whether they're out. I think it's a good thing. I think a lot of people are probably a little pissed off right now, especially, the players are pissed off right now that, that they are cutting it off so far in advance. But I would say this, I think the teams have to do it this way because you got to know who's in and who's out. You can't have a guy go through training camp and get to week 1 and say, hey, you know what, I'm out. You can't do that. I mean, how do you make plans for an upcoming season if we get there, not knowing who those players are going to be, whether a guy's going to opt out in the last minute? Now, there are 2 exceptions to those opt-out rules by the NFL. A player with a new diagnosis that comes up as high risk can opt out at any time. Players with a family member that's hospitalized, or a family member that passes away from COVID or, COVID-related symptoms can opt out at any time. That's understandable. But I think that, players becoming skittish down the road, or players, that are iffy right now, you probably seen the quotes by Odell Beckham Jr., the fact that he doesn't think that there should be a football season, that he would be okay with an opt-out. Opt-out. I mean, why voice your opinion and sway players who may probably already be sitting on the fence to get off the fence, in a negative way, with your chatter? I mean, you're going to go in and you're going to pick up your check. You're going to do all the things. Well, I don't understand the wishy-washy nature, of a statement like that. You're either all in or you're all out. And it's your prerogative and it's your decision to go ahead and choose what it is that you really want to do. But to influence other guys, who are straddling the fence, to me, that's not a good thing. That can't be a good thing in any way. But at the end of the day, I agree with the NFL's position to come up with an opt-out date as soon as possible, because I feel like the longer you leave it out there for players, to kind of mull whether they're in or out, the more likely it is that, you're going to have guys that will be jumping ship, as you get closer to the season, and understand the opt-out clause says that, hey, some guys are going to get $350,000 if they opt out. Some guys are going to get $150,000 if they opt out. I hope that these guys really understand that you never get anything for free from the NFL. If you choose to opt out, and whether you get the $350K or the $150K, they're going to snatch that out of your salary for next year. So I hope they're fully aware of that. But at the end, it's their prerogative. It's their decision what they really want to do. Let's talk about our head coach. And you guys keep the questions coming. I guess the question, Derek, that we can post up there, how do you guys feel about the opt-outs? I know that there was a lot of hatred thrown at Marquise Goodwin when he made the decision, to opt out. And he kind of fired back and said, hey, it's my life. I can do what I choose to do. But that doesn't mean that, us as fans won't have an opinion about it. I just, it's a personal thing. It's a personal thing. And I have my own opinions about the entire COVID and where I think it's going and what I think is driving it, and what's happening and what's, not happening. And to be honest with you, hey, it's my opinion. It's my opinion only. Maybe I'll get into some of that, later on in the show. But everyone has to do what's in their own best interest. But in order for the NFL as an entity to move forward and to operate the way they need to operate, you have to have an opt-out cutoff. And that is, what we're seeing. to that point, Doug Peterson tests positive. And I love the fact that, he came forward and made a statement via video yesterday saying that, yeah, I did test positive, but I feel fine. I have no issues going on, so on and so forth. And that kind of speaks to, my opinions as far as, this COVID thing is concerned. I mean, you look at a guy like Doug Peterson. He's tested positive, doesn't know how he got it. He's now quarantining, running the show via Deuce Staley, virtually from home. He says, there's no problem with him being able to do that. But he says, hey, I'm asymptomatic. I feel fine. He's not sick. Maybe that's the thing that we really need to chat about. We really need to talk about, because there's a difference between testing positive for the COVID and being asymptomatic and being symptomatic. If a guy is symptomatic, that means he's sick. That's different. If you're sick, you need to quarantine, you need to get medical help, you need to do all the things that are necessary. If you're asymptomatic, that means that, you have the virus, but the virus isn't active. And if it's not active, I mean, how are you going to make the rules for quarantining guys that actually test positive for the COVID? You're starting to see in baseball, some of these guys that have been asymptomatic, they have a 48-hour span, a 48-hour period where, if they test negative and test negative for a second time, then they're allowed to come back to their teams respectively. To me, that makes sense. Now, if a guy tests positive and he's symptomatic, that's different. Now we need to put that guy on the shelf. He's got a 14-day quarantine period. We got to get multiple tests to try to kind of figure out, what the next moves will be. But with guys that are asymptomatic, that poses a whole different scenario for the NFL to have to deal with. Do you treat them both the same, or do you treat them differently? Talking about the tests, the multiple tests. You'll take a test and, some people are testing negative, false positive, and the more times you take a test, it seems like to me at some point in time, you're probably gonna wind up positive. So, what's the success rate of some of these tests? And then, when you're dealing with deaths from COVID, and again, this is just my personal opinion, there's a massive difference between dying from COVID and dying with COVID, because someone can pass away with COVID and be asymptomatic, showing no symptoms whatsoever. And they could die from natural causes. They could die from cancer, whatever it may be. So there's a difference between that and someone that comes down, with COVID and they're sick and they have all the symptoms of COVID and die from COVID. So sometimes those are the things that we don't take into consideration. Those are some of the things that we don't talk about. I just wanted to address them and throw it out to you guys. What do you feel? How do you think about the entire, situation where players have the option to opt out of this season leading into Thursday, the deadline? Okay, let's get back to some questions here. I think I'm going to scroll back up, Derek, and try to see what the last question was. I think it was David. Lynette DeShield wants to know, she says, do you think this year, with acquiring Slay, Hargrave, and the returning defense from last year, is this a make or break year for Jim Schwartz? You know what, Lynette, I don't really think so. I think that, even though we haven't seen this team play the Buddy Ryan style defense, the Jim Jones style defense that we've been accustomed to over the years, I think that Jim Schwartz's defense has been okay. I think that we're in a different era of football where you can only build your team one way. You're either going to be an offensive juggernaut or you're going to be a defensive juggernaut. And I think when this team made the decision to move up and trade up and make all the maneuvers that they did to draft Carson Wentz number 2 overall, they automatically turned themselves into a offensive-centric team. And that doesn't mean that you can't be good defensively, especially through the time period of a quarterback being on his rookie deal. And I think that's one of the reasons why 2017 they became champions, because the defense was pretty darn good. I mean, the offense was stellar, but the defense was still pretty good. Those players that you mentioned are going to make a big difference. Having Malik Jackson back is going to make a big difference. Creating competition throughout the rest of all the secondary positions is going to make the defense better. Having some young blood at the linebacker positions to push some of the guys that are there, obviously that's an area of concern for a lot of people, myself as well. But, with the Davion Taylor draft pick, with the Sean Bradley draft pick, I think there's going to create some pressure and create some competition at that position that makes it better. So I really believe that, it seems to me like Jim Schwartz's, position, unless the defense completely bombs, is pretty safe. And just as a caveat, I think, we should always remember that Jim Schwartz was hired by Howie Roseman before the hire of Doug Peterson was completed. So in my opinion, I don't think that this, whether Jim Schwartz remains here or whether Jim Schwartz goes is necessarily a Doug Peterson issue. It will revolve around what Howie Roseman thinks of the defense, or it will revolve around the fact that the defense is played so well that Jim Schwartz has now repositioned himself again as a candidate for a head coach and gets a head coaching job and moves on. Okay, let's see. Chris Ransom wants to know, do you think the Eagles should bring in a veteran linebacker and wide receiver and running back? Well, those are a lot of ands. I mean, I think that, we probably need some depth at the running back position. Even with Marquise Goodwin opting out, I think we have enough depth at the wide receiver position. If Alshon can get back, and I think, the longer this thing goes, the more chance it is that, he comes back and, can be productive at some point. And listen, we use a lot of draft capital as well to up the, the competition and the depth at the wide receiver position. I think that we've got to give those young guys an opportunity, and we saw some of that last year. We've got to give some of these young guys an opportunity to show what they can do. Because if those guys can come along, that just creates a better situation for Carson. He has an opportunity to grow with these guys as these guys continue to grow. He's locked in, and he needs a core of wide receivers that can possibly grow with him over the next, 10 to 12 years. You always need experience, but, the only way that young players gain experience is by playing. You don't gain experience by standing on the sideline watching someone else play. They've got to get out there and they've got to make the mistakes, and they've got to be corrected, and they've got to grow, and they've got to figure out what it is that they've got to do in the offseason to grow and become better players. But the only way that these guys have an opportunity to do that is by playing. So when you go and you bring in more veterans, that just, arrests the growth of the young players, that you've drafted. And, especially when you draft a guy number 1 at 21 in the first round, I think the Eagles and everyone else expects for Jalen Reagor to step up to the plate and show us what it is that, that he's going to bring to the table. And we expect for Hightower and Watkins to step in and be competitive and try to earn a spot in that wide receiver room. But time will tell. Time will tell. Let's see. What else do we have here? Let's go with Elizabeth Bobbitt. I feel with all the precautions that have been put in place, it shouldn't be a problem. Well, I think she's referring to trying to get the season underway. And Elizabeth, I agree with you. I think they're learning as they grow. I feel like baseball and basketball are the beta test, even though baseball is kind of struggling through some things right now. I think in time they'll get it right. Players will begin to understand and realize that in order for them to, have this 60-game season, that they're going to have to make some adjustments to their habits. Everyone thought that was going to be the case, that guys understood and knew right out of the box that that's what they were going to have to do. But, you've always got some hard-headed guys that's going to test the system and try to see what they can get away with. I think now that they know what the circumstances are, that they'll make the adjustments. Basketball, even though they're in the bubble, they seem to be doing just fine. And I think these things are beta tests for the NFL to try to see, okay, what kind of adjustments can we make? What kind of changes to our protocols can we put in place based upon what we're seeing, with Major League Baseball and basketball, to ensure that somehow, some way we can get the season started and we can also get the season moving in the most productive of directions. I think my producer's got our first live question teed up for us. I see Larry Walker. How you doing, my friend? Welcome to the Seth Joyner Show. What's on your brain today?
Hey, Seth, thanks a lot. Really enjoyed the show. Big
Thank you,
time
man.
Eagles fan. Listen, you've been talking a lot about these issues relating to players and COVID and the testing. And one of the things I haven't seen in the conversation relating to players and the teacher and players union is if a player tests positive, gets sick, and has long-term health issues. I know someone you like is a former player and is a part of the union and how important it is to you. But I haven't heard a lot of conversations about guys who get sick and some of the long-term problems they could have well after their career is over. For those who tested positive for COVID.
Well, hey, listen, these guys, if they're on an NFL roster, or even if they get sick and there's issues during training camp or during, this OTA period, they're covered under the group insurance policy, so they're going to be okay. That's a great question because, I don't know if you guys know, but once you retire from the NFL, now you move into a time period, the clock begins to tick how many years you're actually able to participate in the group policy insurance plan. I think the time frame is about 5 years now. So the question is, if you've got long-term issues and your group policy runs out, what is it that, what is the NFL going to do as far as what your health concerns, are concerned? And I think there are probably provisions in place, Larry, for that we aren't privy to, that we don't know. A lot of that is within player benefits. But the hope is, hey, listen, I think that we're talking about guys that are in their early 20s to mid 30s, with a few exceptions of guys that are playing, like Tom Brady is playing, in his 40s. These guys, for the most part, unless they have a pre-existing condition, it was very interesting to me today. I read the article, or I read a quote from Von Miller, who said he had an experience with COVID in the off season, and he lost sense of smell, sense of taste, got weak, lost 15 pounds. It took him, 2 weeks of training to start getting back to where he felt normal. And then at the end of, the quote, at the end of, this article that I read, he says that I have asthma, and that probably contributed to it. I'm sure there have to be protocols in place. That's why some of these players have the ability to opt out of playing this season. At the other end of the spectrum, if a player decides to opt in and play and something happens and he has pre-existing conditions, he's made that decision to play, knowing that he has these pre-existing conditions. Because we know I think we're smart enough to identify and know what the issues are. If you're 65 and above, you're highly, highly at risk for the dangers of COVID. If you're below that number, the greatest risk are falling to people who have pre-existing conditions that have, limited capacity in their immune system to fight this thing. But those who have strong immune systems that are, 20 to mid 30s, they may experience it, but they're going to recover from it, and they're going to be, they're going to do well recovering from it. So it's really just, that type of situation. I can't imagine that these guys in this unusual season, Larry, would experience COVID and maybe have some long-term effects. And the NFL doesn't have in place the protocols to make sure that these guys, are properly taken care of. Let's see. I'm trying to read some of these questions as we go. Oh, there we go. My producer's got my back. Appreciate that, Derek. Would a bubble for each city team work? Good question, Jay. I think that it would work. The problem with a bubble, as you prepare, sooner or later you have to exit that bubble. This isn't like the bubble in Orlando for NBA, where guys are in the bubble and playing all their games in the bubble. It's going to be different as far as the NFL is concerned, because you're going to be playing just like Major League Baseball. You have a series, the Phillies are playing in Yankee Stadium, then they're home, and then they're down in Atlanta, and then they're going here. They're all over the place. Football's got to be run right along the same lines, where teams are going to have to travel. And once you leave the bubble, you travel. Like when the Eagles got to leave and go to Dallas and play the Dallas Cowboys, you're going to a different city with a whole bunch of different issues that you're going to have to address and deal with. So I think throughout the training period leading up to the first week and through the first week, that works. But you got the Washington Redskins coming in town first week. They've been in their bubble in Washington throughout this 5-6 week span. And all of a sudden they get on the bus and they drive up, I-95 North, and they come up to play the Eagles, and you've got this interaction. You've got this game that transpires between the Washington Redskins, who've been only in Washington, and the Philadelphia Eagles have been sequestered only in Philadelphia. And all of a sudden, for 4 hours, you got this game going on. If that's the situation and that's the circumstances, then, hey, at the end of the day, the bubble only works for this training period. Other than that, once you exit the bubble and you start playing games, it's really not, that effective. Appreciate the question, Jay. I see my main man, Barrett Brooks, my partner from Pre and Post Game Live, is on.
So, man,
you got plenty to talk about. Let's chat it up.
Definitely. Oh, man, I was just tripping off the fact that they have a snitch line that players can call on other players if they're not abiding by the protocol of not, self-quarantining and being 6 feet apart from people outside of the job, man. That's going to be tough, man, because there will be a lot of guys that are going to talk about, all right, if you're a young guy, you're newly in the NFL, or a guy that's not married or don't have any family or anybody that they can really rely on, like the family that most married people or guys that have significant others, it's going to be hard for them to go 6 months without being able to be around anybody. Tell me what you think about that, because I was on the end of players are police themselves. I didn't necessarily think they need a snitch line, but hey, these are new wave players, and I don't know how they're going to conduct themselves accordingly.
Well, I'm not a fan of any kind of snitch line. It just doesn't make any sense. I mean, when you and I played, like you said, we policed ourselves. If this was a situation that arose, back in our day, we had anywhere from 8 to probably 12 veteran leaders on the football team.
Absolutely,
that would have just taken it upon ourselves to go to a young guy and express to him what was really important, and that it was important to do what needed to be done to ensure that we could not only get this season underway, but also have a situation where they follow the protocols. And I see, Lawrence Melton, just put a question up. He said, you got to police those young guys. Yeah, you got to police them, but I don't think you police them through snitching. I mean, you got to understand the what you open up, when you create this environment of guys snitching on each other. Because, if you and I are in a battle for position, what's to prevent me from going to management? Hey, you know what? I seen Barrett, he was out with these two girls the other night, and come on, man.
Yeah, exactly.
What are we really doing here? It goes way beyond just, guys not abiding by the rules. I think everybody knows who's doing the right thing and who's not doing the right thing, and it's incumbent upon the leaders that you have on your roster to get the young guys to buy in, and the coaching staff to continue to express to these young guys how vital it is that they follow the protocols.
Yeah, the perfect example of that, my rookie year, I'm out there playing. Our first game is the who for what game. We're playing against Tampa Bay, and Hardy Nickerson is the middle linebacker. I'm new. It's my first game in the NFL. I'm feeling myself. I'm starting. I got RC, Randall Cunningham's my quarterback. I got, guys like, Ricky Waters. My left guard at the time was Guy McIntyre. Rylan McKenzie's one of the original Hogs. He's my center. And I'm out there. I'm just talking crazy. I'm acting a fool. I'm cussing out Hardy Nickerson. Hardy turned around and said, look, hey, rookie, shut up and don't say another word. I said, what did you do? And as I was saying that, Guy McIntyre grabbed me. If you say one more word, Rylan McKenzie, you got one more word to say. And then RC, I got in the huddle. Why are you talking so much, rookie? And that's how they policed me. From that point on, I didn't say anything else for the next 15 games, because the level of respect that I had for those older players and understanding they've been around the block and I haven't, that kicks in. Well, I don't know if they have the same environment, these days with the NFL players we had back then. I mean, these guys are sensitive and emotional. If you yell at them and make them go play another position on the other side of the field, like you got a left tackle that you make them play right tackle, they get sensitive about it. I just see trouble in that and arising because you have the autonomy now to blow the whistle. I mean, how can you do that to a player, man?
Well, hey, listen, Lynette DeShield says, with the newer generation, they definitely need parameters. I agree. She says they're not cut from the same cloth as players from the past. So when you guys play, they have a different mentality, unfortunately. Yep. I agree with her to a certain extent, but there are certain things about the game of football and how it operates, that never change. Okay, if you're going to be successful as a team, then you better have some leaders. You better have some guys, that have a voice, some guys that understand, the direction of the team from the head coach's standpoint, that can voice that to the guys in the locker room, and that those guys not only respect what the head coach is saying, but respects the fact that the head coach looks at those guys as leaders to police that situation.
Absolutely.
Makes no sense whatsoever to me, where you got guys that are snitching on each other that's on the same team. Understand the dissension that creates. Not only what I talked about earlier, if we're in a personal battle for a position, but, okay, let's say you call and you snitch me out. Okay, now I got a beef with you. Do you think that beef's going anywhere anytime soon? Because if it's true and it's found out, the first thing that the team is going to do is they're going to find me. Now I'm pissed at you because you took money out of my mouth, because out of my pocket, because you snitched. I mean,
absolutely.
All of these things have to be thought through before you put something like this in place. And then that dissension creates what? Because you got your boys on the team and I got my boys on the
animosity.
Team. Now you create this fracture, on a 53-man roster that need not be there, that can't be there if you're going to be successful and be able to win. That's
exactly what it is. And I got one more question for you, man, before I get out of here. It was brought to me in a podcast last week about maybe we need to quarantine a quarterback on our team. Now, going into the season, for instance, you have Carson Wentz, who works closely with Doug Peterson, who now has tested positive for COVID-19. Now, you know how we're in these locker rooms. I mean, not the locker room, but in these meeting rooms, or small, intimate, closed enclosures. So now you have all the quarterbacks in one room. What if Doug went into that same room and was in there with Press Taylor, the quarterback's coach, and those guys were sitting in there and they're talking, they're in there, and of course, you know how long we're in there. I mean, 2.5 hours. And they now have contracted it. They're saying now that they may start quarantining at least one quarterback through the season, just to make sure this guy is safe from acquiring anything from other players. What do you think about that? Because they're talking about doing it with Nate Sudfeld, and it's a question that BA down and Bruce Arians down in Tampa Bay has also considered as far as doing, and it just arose because of here we are, the head coach right now, Doug Peterson, has tested positive for COVID-19.
Yeah, but just like I said before, there's a difference between testing positive for COVID-19 and being asymptomatic and having symptoms and actually being sick. I thought it was a really positive thing when Doug Peterson said, "Hey, yes, I've contracted it, but I'm fine. I'm feeling fine. I'm doing well. Now I'm quarantining." Okay, so now does he stay in quarantine for 2 weeks, or do we go back and test him after a week? And if he's test positive, negative, what's the sense in making him stay in quarantine for another week, being away from the team if he's negative?
Right,
so
right.
All of these things, come into play. And my thing is, you're going to quarantine a guy. What does that mean? You're going to quarantine one quarterback.
That's what I asked. Yeah. What does that mean?
What is that going to accomplish? Because does the guy practice with you? Because if he practices with you, the quarantine means nothing because he's going to be around you. Okay.
That's it. He's not going to be around you at all. He's not going to be around them at all. So, he would just practice with himself and make sure he's in shape going into the season, just in case.
Let me ask you this question, B. Okay. We seen Nate Sudfeld play when he practiced with the whole team. What the hell good he going to do if he ain't practicing with the team and all of a sudden he got to play?
Right.
Come on, man. Let's just be real. Most teams are built upon their quarterback. Not their backup. Okay. A lot of times you'll see the positions where you see guys that are essential. You want to talk about essential. Your quarterback is essential and your offensive line is essential. You don't see offensive linemen tapping out, standing on the sideline, only playing 60% of the plays. Okay. If you're a starter, you play the entire game. The quarterback plays the entire game. So that's necessary. Who the heck wants to go, and this is the problem with this whole thing. What happens when your major NFL stars begin to contract it and now they got to sit down? Who wants to go to a Kansas City Chiefs game and see the Kansas City Chiefs without Patrick Mahomes? To me, that's the problematic thing in all of this, which makes me, kind of leery about the season getting off and going forward the way that it should go forward. I don't want to see the Philadelphia Eagles play without Carson Wentz at the helm. Okay. He is their franchise guy. They just paid him as their franchise guy. What is the team going to look like? And we've seen what that looked like. What is the team going to look like without your best players on the field? That's really what it comes down to. So you can try to sit this guy aside, but if your best quarterback is your starter and you're going to go into the season with him, and then he gets sick and you're going to bring in this guy you've been quarantining, and all of a sudden he's got to play, and he wasn't half that player when he was present and practicing.
No time with his guys?
Makes no sense to me. Makes no sense.
Well, they're definitely considering it at this point, man. It's crazy that these are crazy times in which we're going through. I mean, we understand this is a global pandemic, and at this point, there's so many variables that we have to worry about going through the season. But I mean, at this point, if these players take care of themselves and understand, how serious this is as we go into the season, because it's not really the guys that are playing that really going to suffer from this, in all actuality. They're in shape. They're in the peak of, prime of being, in shape. So, but it's their families that they're thinking about, and at this point, man, it's going to be tough, man. I can't wait, man, to get back with you, dog. Pre and post game, we're going to rock it again, man. Knock it out the park as we always do, man.
All right. I will say this, and I just want you and my viewers and my listeners to consider this. I'm in no way being insensitive to the situation, okay?
Right.
But the Spanish flu killed millions, right?
Yes.
Killed millions. Now, that was a pandemic.
Yeah, absolutely.
There are 150,000 people that died of the COVID so far. In my mind, that's far from a pandemic, man. It's an issue. It's a problem. It ain't no pandemic. I'm sorry.
Well, at this point, man, I'm hoping they find something, man, like a flu shot or something, just to get us over this hump, man, so we can get into some real sports, man.
I've never had a flu shot in my life, man. I don't plan on start taking none now.
Well, that's because you stay in shape, man. You ready to ride,
bro?
You could probably still play right now, bro. I see it all the time. When we walking up, man, we going into the building. Guys say it all the time. Hey, he could probably play right now. They never say that about me, though, man. I'm feeling some sort of way, man. But they always say that about you, bro.
I got one series that I need a cold tub and an IV, bro. Hey, man, I appreciate you coming on, man.
Yes, sir, man. Appreciate you, man. Seeing a little bit, bro.
You got it. You got it. Let's see. Give me a question, D. What you like? Oh, my man, Michael Wakatama. What can you recommend for college seniors who are NFL candidates, but now their season is canceled? Hey, listen, man, if you're a college senior and you're not in one of those conferences that have made the decision to play only in conference games, these NFL teams have film on you. They know what you can do. They've got a grade on you, so on and so forth. The best thing that you can do is just continue to train, continue to work on your craft, find someone, that can help you continue to get better at what you do best. And realize that, you know what, hey, these teams understand what's going on. I don't think if a kid can't play this year, if a kid can't show what he can do, I don't really think that it adversely affects his draft status. I mean, especially if he's a guy that, that's a projected first rounder. Now, things are going to adjust, things are going to change. The only thing that you can control realistically, is what you do after you get drafted. Draft position is important because, obviously, the type of money that you make or you don't make. But everyone has, an equal footing, so to speak, when it comes to going to camp and showing and proving to teams what it is that they can do. It's one thing to get drafted. The real work begins once you get drafted and you get to your team. Can you pick up on the system? Can you fit in? Can you adjust to the pro game? So on and so forth. Can you do all the things that are necessary for you to make a roster? So I would say to these guys, hey, don't really worry about it. Just continue to train and do whatever you got to do to prepare, and and let the chips fall where they may. I can see, my lady Kendra, she just threw a bunch of exclamation points at me, probably over my pandemic comment. But she knows how I feel about it. She just don't want me saying too much. But me, I can't bite my tongue. Glenn Washington Senior wants to know if the Eagles asked me to coach, would I consider it? Actually, the Eagles are one of the few organizations, that I would give great consideration to, just because of not only the fact that I played there, but my affinity for the organization, my affinity for the city. To go and coach somewhere else, I'd really have to look at the dynamics of it and try to figure out, do I fit here? Does my old school mentality and way of approaching things really fit in. If it was Philadelphia, I would adjust, how I did things, to be able to fit in and be a part of that because of what I think I could bring, to the linebacker position and, how I feel about being able to coach in the city in which I played. Let's see what else you got. Billy Covington Jr., he said, I was in El Paso in the service during the time you were at UTEP. Are you the only player ever to play in the league? Oh, gosh, no, man. I mean, bro, you got to do the history. Go back and look. There was a lot of great players that preceded me. There were guys that had an opportunity to play. Kevin Belcher that I played with, he was a first-round pick of the New York Giants. God rest his soul. He played for quite a few years for the Giants before, he got into a car accident and, that ended his career. Tony Tolbert actually played behind me, played and won 3 Super Bowls with the Dallas Cowboys as a defensive end. There's multiple guys from the University of Texas at El Paso that have had an opportunity, to either precede me or follow in my footsteps and play in the NFL. Let's see. David Crane says the technology and level of care now as compared to the Spanish flu are 2 different levels. If the death rate were the same level as in 1918, health insurance and medical schools would be worthless. Hey, good point. But the fact still remains, you got 150,000 people, David, that have passed away supposedly from COVID. And to be honest with you, we have more people that die from that, from suicide every single week. We've got more people that starve from hunger, in a 3-month span. There's a lot of things that take people out of this world into the afterlife at a much greater number, but we're not talking about those things. We're talking about the COVID. And I'm going to leave it at that before my girl comes in here and jumps on me. Andrew Wolfington wants to know, which young linebacker do you think will step up this year and help fill the void left by Bradham losing? I don't think there's really much of a void. We didn't really get much out of Nigel Bradham last year. I think that's one of the reasons why he's no longer here. I really look for Davion Taylor to step up. I think, it's been a long time since the Eagles have drafted a linebacker that high in the 3rd round. So I do really feel like they're looking for him to be that guy to step up and make some noise and challenge at that position. But I also think that Sean Bradley, who played at Temple University, has a lot of talent, has a lot of ability, and has a lot of skill sets, that could make some noise at that position. I think, we've got some other linebackers, TJ, I forget TJ's last name, but they're pretty high on him. And he showed a lot of promise, on special teams last year. And I think they're waiting for, him to step up out of the special teams mode and be able to step into, play some linebackers. So even though there's a lot of apprehension about the linebacker position, I really do feel like there's enough talent and competition there, to make the cream rise to the top, and you're going to get the best out of what you have on the roster, and hopefully that's a good enough. I think with the improvement at the defensive line, between being able to get Malik Jackson back and then going out and signing a Hargrave to create some chaos on that defensive line. I think chaos on the defensive line always makes a linebacker's job that much easier. I attribute my success as a linebacker to Reggie White and Jerome Brown and Mike Pitts and Clyde Simmons and Mike Golick and Andy Harmon. When you got good guys in front of you as a linebacker, to some degree, it makes your ability as a linebacker and your job a little easier. That doesn't mean that, that what you do isn't legitimized. It just means that you've got, a solid front across the board. Because, at the other end of the spectrum, you can have a great front and have a bunch of bums playing linebacker and still have some issues. Great question, by the way, though. Let's see what else we have here. What you got for me, Derek? With the rookies coming in, Scott Streeter wants to know, what can the rookies do to improve and mesh with the rest of the team besides reading the playbook? Now that's a great question, Scott, because I really feel like the players who are at the greatest disadvantage throughout all of this craziness are the rookies. They've got to come in, they've got to learn the playbook. They hopefully they come in and they're in the best possible shape that they can be in. They prepared themselves, hopefully, to be able to go into the preseason and show what they can do for 4 games. And now they've had that snatched away from them. It's hard. And I really feel for them because, that's the world that I came from. I came from the world of being drafted in the 8th round, having to show the organization that I could be a good special teams player and have them believe that I could translate what I do on special teams to the linebacker position. You've effectively snatched that away from these young guys, and these teams are going to have to make decisions on guys that they're going to keep and guys that they're going to let go based upon only what they see these guys do, in 14 padded practices. That's kind of unfair. It really is. So I think really what you're going to wind up seeing, Scott, is that these guys that they have drafted at a high position, they're going to get the benefit of the doubt, because I can promise you the one thing that organizations do not like to do is draft guys in high positions as rookies and wind up having to cut them after 1 or 2 years. That speaks to an inability to scout properly, to project properly, and draft properly. Anytime you see a guy that's drafted high and he doesn't work out. This situation has only exacerbated and made it even that much harder for these young guys to not only show what they can do, but to earn a spot on a roster that probably turns over anywhere from 12 to 20%, depending on the team, every single year. And that's problematic. And quite frankly, I feel for those guys more than anything else. Schrader Media wants to know, Seth, what do you think about the Rock buying the XFL? Anytime, spring football to me is a great thing. Why? Because it provides an opportunity and a way for guys who are fringe NFL players and guys that have been overlooked. And trust me, there's a lot of guys that have been overlooked. I would surmise to tell you that there are just as many guys, good players, that are on the streets that don't get an opportunity to make a 53-man roster because of the business of football and because of the numbers and because of, whatever other things may crop up. What the XFL creates is an opportunity for these guys to continue their career, to continue to show the NFL and the CFL what potentially they could do. So, it's a good thing. It's a good thing, when you've got other opportunities. It also creates other coaching opportunities for guys, who might not have the opportunity to get on an NFL roster as a coach, or guys who are aspiring to be head coaches in the NFL that may have been defensive coordinators or offensive coordinators. Now they have an opportunity to go in and be a head coach, to be a coordinator, to continue to develop themselves so that they get to a point where, when opportunity presents itself again at the NFL level, that there's an end for them. Hey, even I might not be all that adverse to accepting some kind of role or some kind of coaching opportunity in the spring, in the XFL. So I'm glad to see that that's back alive. Hopefully, this group, along with The Rock, will come on and have the financial wherewithal, the financial backing, so that you can have a complete season, that the XFL will be strong enough, to survive and not just be another one of those situations where all of a sudden, they get started, they've got a couple of games, the finances dry up, and all of a sudden, these kids and these coaches get the rug snatched out from under them, once again. So I hope that, more than anything, we get to a situation where that is, 100% the situation and the deal for XFL for these young guys. Guys, listen, I appreciate, the great show comments, the excellent dialogue. I appreciate you guys, coming on, and make sure you tune in week after week. Follow me over on Instagram at Seth Joyner, on Twitter at Seth Joyner. Follow my fan page. Seth Joyner Show has been renamed on Facebook. A lot of you follow me on my personal page, but there's a lot going on, and the show itself has its own page and a celebrity page over at the Seth Joyner Show on Facebook. What else am I forgetting? Follow me on YouTube. Thank you guys who have subscribed, to the YouTube channel. We now got enough followers that we got our own link. You'll see it in the promos leading up to the show. Great taking you guys questions. I appreciate, the interaction. We're going to do this from time to time, just so that we can, interact with you guys. I don't want to have a show where it's just me talking. Don't want to have a show where I bring on my guests and it's just them talking. We always wanted to make this as interactive as we could make it, with the viewers, with the listeners. And, you guys have made this a hit. We did it a couple of weeks ago, and I thought it'd be good, week 2 going into training camp, to do it again today. And you guys have been phenomenal. Hey, listen, I appreciate the follows. I appreciate, you guys tuning in. I have another great show for you guys next week. Gonna bring on, I ain't gonna tell you who I'm gonna bring on. I'm gonna just keep it a surprise, keep you all waiting with bated breath. But listen, thanks to my producer, Derek Stevenson, my producer, Tom Schrader. Appreciate you guys. I'm looking forward to another show next week. We'll be right back here, same time. Listen, you guys be careful out there. You take care of each other, love each other, and I'll see you right back here next week.